We're going to go ahead and get started with our class this morning. So this is a continuation of the gift that we started talking about last week, which is the gift of teaching. So the class is Your Role in the Body. It's about, well, the next slide will tell you what it's about. So I went through these pretty quickly last week. I might need to spend a little bit more time on them, but if you have not been in this class, then here is the general overview of what it is about. I think that there is still some confusion exactly what the class is about, so I wanted to talk about that a little bit further. So most of the gifts that we're talking about, which gift is defined as the combination of God-given talent and where do I have it? Combination of God-given talent and passion. So skills, where the intersection of skills meets focus, desire, again, passion, things that you care deeply about, and where does your talent lie. So when we talk about gifts, that is what we're talking about. So the list this is also based off a book called Spiritual Giftedness by Doug Peterson, and he has 10 gifts that he lists, and they're based off the passages in Ephesians chapter 4 and Romans chapter 12. So some of these things that he lists might be offices in the church or a specific role that is funded by the church. So there is a difference between an office and an activity and a gift. At least this is how I'm trying to explain the breakdown of them. So there can be an office of a missionary, so someone that we support who takes God's word to places where the Bible is not prevalent. There might be an office of an evangelist or a teacher. So Kevin is our evangelist/teacher, so he teaches those of us on the preaching rotation to be better at it. He teaches the congregation as a whole through classes, and he also evangelizes by going on campus to K-State and talking to students and non-students and people that he runs into there. There's also the office of an elder or a deacon. However, so that is one thing. Then there are activities, and I would argue that all of us should do those activities, which is what he lists in the 10 gifts. So all of us should be nurturers, all of us should be mercy givers, all of us should be encouragers, all of us should be teachers, as we're talking about today. However, that's not necessarily what this class is meant to do, is to go over those, because we all agree we should be doing them. We all might not be good at them, but the goal then is to take a look at the attitudes that those offices or those activities have, and to say, okay, so I have that attitude, I have that natural skill or that natural focus. How do I use that then to be an effective minister for the body? How do I use that to effectively help build up the body? So that's kind of more where we're going, what the class is intended to do, and also because I heard recently there was someone who, so I'm hearing this like second or third hand, right? Someone who said, I want to get involved, but I don't know how. And this person said, that's actually what Tyler's class on Sunday morning is about. I was like, yeah, it is. So if you're unsure of how to get involved, how do you get more involved in the body? What are some things that you can do to get you started, to figure out what you like and what you don't like? Then, so when we talk about the 3 lenses, that's the yourself lens there. The next lens is, how do we as mentors and encouragers help those who have those gifts and who want to do better at them, or who don't know what they're doing? How do we look at their skills and the things that they care about and say, okay, I think that this might be a good place for you to start to figure out what it is that you can do to help be active in the body. And then finally, the church as a body as a whole lens. And I really hope that we can get to that today to discuss, and every gift that we're covering going forward, to discuss how do we as a church body do that, and can we do better, which I think ties into, as Mike said a couple weeks ago, ties into the survey that's going around that everyone should fill out, so free promotion for filling out the survey. But what can we do better as a church? What are we good at as a church? And how can we do better at using our gifts to interact with the community or the world as a whole? So hopefully, and so there are 10 gifts that we're going over. This is the 4th gift, I believe. So we still have 6 more to go. So after this, we'll go over encouraging, then we'll go over nurturing, then I think it's mercy giving after that. So we'll continue on. I'll put all these on the screen as well at one time. So this is based off of, again, the discussion we had in the introductory lesson. So if you're curious about more details on that, please go to the church YouTube channel and go to the introduction video on this series to go over this in more detail. Again, this is based off of Romans chapter 12 and 1 Corinthians chapter 12. So all of us have gifts and all of us are expected to use them. That's what we found when we studied those passages. The big thing I'm going to point out every time, because I think it's extremely important, is that the gifts should be used in love. That's what 1 Corinthians 13 is all about, is it doesn't matter if you are the greatest. So it's more about, so it kind of ties into speaking in tongues, ties into a lot of this. So when it's talking about be humble in your gift, because it seemed like in the Corinthian church, or at least in other churches at that time, that people who were able to speak in tongues were kind of held in higher regard than other people were. And so Paul is saying, hey, just because you're able to do that doesn't mean that you're better than anyone else. That just means that that was the gift that was given to you by God. And so then if we relate that to us, those of us who, so we kind of tend to elevate those who might speak in front of people more. So if you're someone who's really good at proclaiming God's word in front of thousands of people, if you're someone who has put 100 people in the water, baptized, maybe I shouldn't put it in the water, but someone who has baptized 100 people in the last year, we're like, oh, they are this level of Christian and I am down here. That's not the case. So that's then on the flip side, don't be afraid to use your gift if maybe you don't think that you're as good at it as other people are, because all of us have gifts, all of us are expected to use them, and all of us in combination can build the body and make it more and more effective. So, but where I start off by going and then went another direction is that all the gifts should be used in love. So, as we're talking about teaching today, and we talked about the immature teacher briefly last week, if when someone asks a question, you just smack them on the head and say, you're wrong about that, that's not using your gift in love, right? So, and the same can be true of anything else. Now, like, mercy giving and encouragement seem to kind of tie in with love a little bit better, but those can also be used not in love. So, it doesn't matter how good you are at your gift, if you're not using it in love, then it's ineffective, which is the whole point of 1 Corinthians 13. So, that is also a main point that I want to try to drive home every week when we talk about it. So, just real quick, last week, the discussion was not going in the direction that I wanted it to go, but I'm someone who has to process things, and so at the time, I wasn't sure why that was, and then you thought about it quite a bit this week, and determined that it was my fault as to why it didn't go the direction I wanted it to go. First of all, the first question that was asked was on this last point, which is now different because I changed it. So Aaron had a question because I started off with, one who instructs, they transfer to others what they have learned through research and experience. So if you're unaware, Aaron is a professor, so he is literally paid to teach and to research. And so when he saw one who instructs as the definition of teaching, he was like, it's a little more to it than that, right? And I wasn't able to make the connection in my head that for each chapter or each gift that Doug Hamilton goes over, he says, here's the Greek word, and here's what that word means. So that's all I was putting up there was the Greek word means one who instructs. That didn't mean that I thought that's all there was to it. Because then when he started talking about the holistic teaching, like what that meant, I went, I agree with you. And he was like, but you have one who instructs on the board. Like, that doesn't make sense. So I think that hopefully that helps that to make a little bit more sense. It'd be like me. So I might have told the story before, but sometimes sometimes if daycare is closed and we have to watch the kids at home, I try to do a little bit of work. So I get my laptop out, get a second monitor, put it on the table so I can watch the kids, and they immediately come to me and want to mess with my stuff. And so Lily will get up on the chair and start punching the keyboard and goes, look, Daddy, I'm working too. I'm like, well, there's a little more to it than that, right? There's more to my job than just punching letters into a keyboard. So if you said that's the definition of accounting, I would have said, are you sure that's all there is to it? So I now understand why Aaron had that question when I put that on the board. So hopefully that will help that. So the question is then, so what is the gift of teaching? So everyone, or I guess I got a little bit ahead of myself. So everyone can or should teach in one form or another, but not everyone has the gift of teaching. So that's what this class is focusing on, those with the gift of teaching. Just as next week when we talk about encouragement, all of us should be encouragers, but there are some who are really good at that, and that is their focus is to encourage others, and that is what we'll discuss there. So what is teaching? It's the God-given ability to study, analyze, and proclaim biblical truth to help believers grow in maturity and to build up the body of Christ. So generally speaking, those with this gift are thorough, they're accurate, and they're insightful. So they can break down complex passages and concepts and then communicate what they've learned to others in a way that's easy for them to understand. So taking a passage that maybe when you first read it, you're like, oh, what does this even mean? Or maybe there's an interpretation of what it has meant for a long time, and that the teacher, the person with this gift, is able to go in and really figure it out and break it down and say, okay, here's what this means. Mike, you had a comment?
A couple of points. I think a lot of times we hesitate. As you well know, when as a teacher, you go through a preparation period for your class. So you oftentimes learn a lot more than what you normally would. Second of all is I think a lot of this comes from our failure to train our kids on how to look into the complex passages and how to study. And from what I understand, Jacob's doing a pretty good job upstairs. We're getting a lot of comments from the kids, and they're enjoying the class because they are digging down into the scripture.
Yes.
And a lot of times we don't know all the answers, and oftentimes that keeps us from teaching. But the response should be, I don't know, let's go look it up and study together to increase your knowledge with the person you're with. And that will not only help them learn how to study and look into the Word, but it also helps you reinforce the fact that we do need to go to the Word for any questions that we might have.
Yes. I would say that, and this is more of a me personality thing, I need to know and to understand before I can take action, which has its pluses and minuses. And so I'm trying to do a better job of, okay, I might not know everything, but I need just to start doing something now, and then I'll figure out more on the way. So in that sense, it'd be real easy if you are like me and going, well, I can't teach a class because I don't have the entire book memorized. I don't know all the points that might be brought up. And yeah, then you start getting, might be gun shy about teaching, but you still need to use it. So another point that you started going towards, which I think is a good transition, is it's not always about complexity, however. So a teacher can use a simple or straightforward passage, but come at it from a unique perspective that really connects with students. And so I think that another part of being a teacher, and Doug doesn't talk about this in the book, it's more, this is just my opinion maybe, is that people who have the gift of teaching are also able to connect to their students in kind of a unique way, or connect to their audience in kind of a unique way. And so Jacob, if he's able to, take all the crazy middle schoolers, right, and connect to them in a way that maybe some others can't, then that's part of the gift. Crystal, you had a comment?
I would probably say the connection piece is even more important than the research piece, because the research piece can come later. They're not going to want to research if you can't connect with them. So for those of you that get scared about the research piece or not having all the knowledge, if you can connect with them, I think that's really the bigger key.
Yeah. Where I work, two of us are on the same level. One's an HR person. I am not an HR person. And so we always talk about being people-focused versus being kind of data-driven or numbers-focused. And so, yes, that is a good reminder for someone who is not people-focused, that connection part is extremely important, and maybe even more important in order to build that connection for people to really learn. So, Colleen has a comment.
I agree with Crystal about the connection, especially if you have that rapport with your students and you have that connection. They will come to you and ask questions. They will know that you'll find that answer if you can. And I think that's so important for them, for those kids to understand that the teacher sometimes has to do some digging too, but they need to be able to go to them and connect so they will learn.
Yes. So a big part of what hopefully I will talk about somewhat soon is being able to read your audience is really important. So I think it goes along with the connect. It's different, but there's some overlap there with being able to connect with the students. And then if you're, maybe I'm coming at this from because this is the class I'm teaching currently, where it's hard to build a one-on-one connection when you have a whole bunch of people you're trying to teach a class with, that you can read the audience and figure out. So at the beginning when I said, okay, it seems like there's some confusion as to what this class is about, so let's try to dig through that and figure out why there is confusion, and then me figuring out is because of what I was putting on the screen was leading to confusion. So we covered all this last week, so if you want to go through it in more detail, see last week's video on our YouTube channel. So, okay. So I'm going to read several statements here. If you think that you agree with these statements, I have questions for you. So, it seems easy for me to learn difficult subjects. People say they learn a lot when I teach. I enjoy education and learning. I make difficult thoughts easy to understand. I double check to make sure my facts are correct. People value my answers to their questions. I believe that training is vital to improvement. I am willing to learn whatever is necessary in order to help others. So I think I've said before, it doesn't have to be that every single one of these just hits you to a T, but I would say that most of them probably should if this is your number one or number two gift. So for instance, I don't know if people learn a lot when I teach. I don't know if people value my answers to their questions, but the other ones I think hit me pretty well, especially double checking to make sure my facts are correct, but that might just be an accountant thing. So is there anyone who you would say that this is probably your gift? Ben? Dark horse candidate. I have questions. I'm going to answer them too, so don't worry. I'll give you some time to think about what you're going to say. So this is the question we're asking. I also have Aaron actually, because he's teaching the kids today, so he's teaching. He actually emailed me unprompted his answers to all these questions. So hopefully we get Aaron's perspective as well as mine, as well as Ben's. So, how do you view the world? Aaron said he views it as an invitation to know God more deeply by exercising my intellect to ask and answer questions about God and God's creation. I would say how I view the world is that every situation is an opportunity to learn. So I've seen a lot of good marriage relationships. I've seen a lot of bad marriage relationships up close. And so I've taken the things I've learned from both and said, okay, now how do I apply that to my marriage relationship? So that's kind of in everything, I'm always thinking about what I'm learning from that situation. What do you think, Ben?
I try to look at the world with curiosity and
Like that word.
yeah, just look at everything and think about, oh, how does that work?
Yes, I like that. So my boss actually, she puts a premium on people who are curious people, and so that's how she's always, yeah. So the curiosity leads you to learning more. So I think Aaron, Ben, and I are all saying something very similar. So Aaron's talking about asking and answering questions, so asking questions to learn more. I just straight up said learning more. Ben's talking about being curious. So what gives you energy? Aaron said that asking questions, studying, debating ideas, and sharing answers gives him energy. So a couple weeks ago when we talked about debating and said that there's a negative connotation with it, and Aaron said maybe there shouldn't be a negative connotation because that's not what it means. So in his mind, I shouldn't speak for Aaron. My guess is, in his mind, when a debate or is saying, okay, I don't see something the way that you do, so I want to understand more about how you see it and then how I see it, and let's compare the two. So it's just coming at it from that perspective. So I would say what gives me energy is learning something new. So learning to start a new hobby or interest area especially. The first few weeks of digging in are like continually hitting gold. So if you think about trying to dig in and to digging in further. Is there? Yeah. Let Ben have the microphone. Sorry, I was like, man, is there something big is going on right now? So, gotcha. Okay. So I'll say this again in the future, and I am really regretting saying this because now it's going to require me to do more on this, but I have started learning Biblical Hebrew. I'm not as far in 2 months ago as I thought I would be at this point, But when I first started looking into it, like I said, it's like looking for gold. So Eddie can testify. I had like the kids' little tablet thing that you can write on and erase. And I was writing all the letters, trying to write the letters in Hebrew, and then the English word for it, and then erasing it and writing it again. And then the kids' bath time, I'm sitting there doing these, listening to what it sounds like to say the different consonants and vowels and things like that to try to figure out, because it's like, man, this is really interesting. The more I dig and the more I dig into it. So that's going to come back later. But I would say continuing to learn about things, and when I find that subject that's something I really like learning about, digging in. So, Ben, what would you say gives you energy?
I love taking things that I'm extremely familiar with and then looking at it from a different angle, and then it just becomes new again.
Gotcha. Yes, that's also an interesting way to look at it, yeah. So that it kind of ties into then the last statement I had on there, that maybe you take a passage that's easy, quote unquote, or simple, and saying, but let's use it this way that maybe you haven't ever thought of before. Yes.
So I kind of look at things a little. I'm not trained as a teacher. However, I found out during COVID that maybe was my gift on accident during the Learning Pod, for those of you that remember the Learning Pod. But anyway, I'm trained in occupational therapy. And so while that's my gift, what I'm trained in wasn't necessarily my real gift, if that makes sense. So I discovered, though, in the gift of teaching, what gave me energy was watching those that I'm working with, the light bulb go off, and them want to learn more. That was probably what gives me the most energy.
Gotcha. Cool.
The light bulb go on, whatever. Thank you, Mom.
Whether it's going off or on.
That is why she's
The
why
light
she's not.
The light bulb changed. That's
the light bulb changed. The light bulb went off. On.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, that's what I think that probably is what gives a lot of teachers energy, is taking those things and watching that light bulb go on.
Yeah. So, yes, agreed. So next, how are you active in your gift? So Aaron said extensive self-study and preparation for teaching, preaching, and participation in classes. So I think this one's like kind of a straightforward one. If you're a teacher, how are you active in your gift? I try to teach others, right? So I participate or try to lead small groups or Bible studies or be on a rotation of people who teach. But then, again, it's a little more than that. So then, like I said before, looking at a subject. So I've also started building up a bunch of books by an author that are like really looking at Old Testament type things and going through that in more detail from a Bible scholar. So trying to, again, look at just in my, after the kids go to bed time, trying to dig in a little bit more deeper, I guess. So, Ben, what do you think? How are you active in your gift?
At the church we regularly attend, I'm on a rotation for Devos on Wednesday nights.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. What are some things you've learned about using your gift effectively? So Aaron said, process matters, not just finding answers. The effort required forms you to be comfortable reevaluating your beliefs, suspending judgment, and gathering evidence as necessary, and not rushing to a conclusion. You improve by becoming better at asking and evaluating, not simply by knowing more. I think that's a really good point. So something that I think I mentioned last week is being comfortable in the truth. So I think I've said before that there are several things that when I was raised, I looked at everything through the filter of what does the Church of Christ think about this topic? And so tried to fit everything I heard into that filter and to make it make sense through that. Instead of just saying, what does the Bible say about this? And being comfortable with whatever I'm led to out of that research or that and prayer and everything that goes into that, and saying, okay, maybe this wasn't how I was, and I should be more specific. What does the Church of Christ that I grew up in, how did they think about this? And that was my filter. So this church has a little different idea of things than the church I grew up in, and going, is that, at first being, that's wrong, no, it's not wrong, looking at it and going, okay, it's okay that this is the case because I think this is in line with the Bible. Mike, you had a comment?
I like the way you said, what does God say about that?
Yes.
Because oftentimes we fall into the trap by saying, oh, well, I think or I believe, and a lot of times it's opinion instead of fact. And so we need to make sure we are grounded enough in the knowledge of the Word, which comes through study, so we got to apply that. And if we are, when I first started teaching, I had that habit, you know, and I think it's just natural to fall into that trap. But you really think about it, it's not what I believe or what I think. It's what God states.
Yes. I think traditions are a good thing, but sometimes if we allow them to get in the way of how we are interpreting the Bible, that's where we start to go wrong. So, like you're saying, don't let that tradition, or Hans is biting at chomping at the, are you chomping at the bit to make a comment there? No, sorry. It just looked like it looked like you were really wanting to make a comment.
I was raising my arm. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Talking stick. Effectively, this is all excellent. And yet, the other side of the other excellence is that that's why I say Christ is what gives me my energy a couple of weeks ago. Because, and I liken this to Elijah. Elijah was doing all the right things, doing everything. Then he was threatened that he had run in the wilderness. Jezebel's going to kill him, all this other stuff. And you have to be willing to take the lulls along with the highs. And I'm just saying that because there will be those. And don't let those lulls be how the devil keeps you from teaching others. You may hit walls or however that works. It obviously helps to know the person that you're talking to. Sometimes you won't. But my point is this, is that keep going no matter how it ends up, whatever conversation, this and that, because you don't gauge yourself, and I'm certain that God doesn't, you don't gauge yourself by what seemingly is a failure, because that's still a seed. And so I just push through. Don't just wait for the good moments.
Yes, that's a really good point that I think that we can all apply.
I'm getting my steps in. You can jump in, Ben, at any time. So
Yeah.
Some things that I've learned while using my gift is like how to, I only have like 15 minutes to do a Devo. And so how do I get this as simple as possible? I try to use pictures because people like pictures. And it works.
That's funny. Yes, agree. That's going to be close to mine.
As we grow closer to God, we understand when we look at the list that you've given that we do have a gift because we have the gift that God has given us, and that we view the world because we look at there's light and darkness, and if we're in the light, then the world is in darkness. And so it gives us energy to share the light that we have, and that's what motivates us to be sharing with others about God.
Yes, agreed. Fred has a comment.
I'm trying to think of a simplified way of giving a very complex answer, but
There you go.
since there are about 30-something people in here, that means that maybe Ben is the only one who actually has the gift. I spent my life at a professional school where everybody got up in front of a bunch of very bright people to lecture, and sometimes in laboratories. However, my wife will nod when I say this. Lex was the man who had the gift. And when the students were asked, who's your favorite teacher? Lex was the answer. Now, what did Lex have that others didn't have? So I'm asking myself that this is not Christian teaching, but it is the gift of teaching. And I believe he probably was a Christian in his mind. He had enormous energy. He was well-grounded in his subject. He really related to his audience, And so they were alert, listening, careful, and of course, in a professional school, is this going to be on the test?
Yeah.
And it was. But they did well on his tests, too. I think all of those things go together as having a gift of any kind, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think, and so what Ben said, what you just said, and what I'm going to say are all related, but just coming at it from different perspectives. So I would say knowing your audience and adjusting to them is of utmost importance. A great topic or thought means nothing if it isn't presented in a way that can be understood or well received. So some of you have been on the receiving end of this. I've started running past, either topic ideas or how the class went with different people. So I know I've talked to Mike about this, I've talked to Derek about this, I've talked to Dwayne about it. Of course, I talk to Addie about it all the time. So, hey, the way I said this, did that make sense to you? And I'm wanting to get honest feedback, or some topic ideas that I have, such as, so ancient Near Eastern culture is a potential topic that I have that we might go through. So I asked Derek and said, and others, not just I'm picking on Derek because Derek picks on me all the time. But so, don't act surprised. So I said, hey, does that sound like an interesting topic? And you're like, well, I think so. And I went, so like 8 weeks or something? You're like, well, maybe like 2 or 3, 4 maybe. So maybe less, because that seems like something, he didn't say this, so I'm interpreting then this is something that maybe I find super interesting that other people would get some value out of, but maybe not by drilling so deep into it. So, what are some pitfalls you've encountered while using your gift? Aaron says, impatience with others when they don't get it as fast as I think they quote-unquote should. Modern schooling teaches us to focus on product, not the slow, formative process required to be attentive disciples of the Word. I would say some pitfalls that I would say I've encountered, which, and maybe this is just from looking a lot, but talking about yourself too much can be a very easy trap. You are very interested in yourself. Not everyone is. So you can say a story that is that has a lot of value, that can really wrap things, that can really tie into what you're talking about. But if your story is 30 minutes long and the tie-in is this big, everyone's going to be like, man, like I don't care what you ate for dinner on your way there. So getting just more straight to the point. Here, I'll get to you in just a second. So getting straight to the point and leaving out the irrelevant details of the story would be important. And then secondly, what I'm apparently is really on my mind, not adjusting to your audience. And so being determined to it seems like everyone is not wanting to go this direction, but we're going there, no matter what. And so being really stubborn about going that direction or driving the certain point home that the audience is either not on board with or not understanding or whatever the case is, and not coming back and tying that loose end up is also a pitfall.
Well, you touched on it a little bit there. I think the process is important. And even though I, as a teacher, might be super enthusiastic and interested in a goal of, say, my students learn a certain amount of basic knowledge, but I need to be able to adjust if they're not as interested in that, or I need to adjust the way I'm presenting it to capture their attention.
Yes.
So you do have to adjust to your audience, and you have to look at the things you're interested in. I'm older than most of the students I taught, so of course I can see the value of knowing these things as you mature, but they don't. Mm-hmm. So there's all that adjustment that needs to come along. So that's part of teaching, I think, and connecting with your students.
Yes, I agree with that.
And my grandson told me, you're really funny. You make all kinds of faces, and you move around, and you do this and that. And I said, so get your attention? He said, yeah. I think, okay, I've accomplished something.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully those in our small group would know that I'm willing to make an adjustment. So last year we started on Revelation. I could tell after several weeks of that was not a valuable thing to go through, because it was two people who are opinionated about what it is about saying their opinions, and everyone going, okay, sounds good. So we switched. We did Judges. That also had varying degrees. But now we are on a topic that I think is pretty good that we're getting more out of. So being able to adjust is important. Colleen?
Well, talking about energy, your gift, and reading the crowd, I became a counselor at camp 40 years ago. Crystal was 5. Oh, I'm sorry. That came out. That was very rude, and I apologize.
Crystal.
She
catching
was
stray.
she was young, but I have to tell you, she was a good 5-year-old at camp. Anyway, we had to read The Cabin. We had certain themes, and the year that was probably the best was the year Satan was the theme. And with those, I eventually became the older girls' counselor. And by reading that cabin, there were certain things that had to be addressed according to them. And we would put a box where they could put a question in. We wouldn't know who it came from, and we worked through so many things. But the sad thing is, I had the energy as we are going along, but as the years went by, I think other people would see this too, that older kids were losing interest. They weren't enthusiastic about learning about God, learning about Satan, and just what the role he plays in our lives along with God. And so that energy just started kind of dwindling. I don't think the kids just weren't as into it as they got older as they used to be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, one of the things that I've run into is communicating the reason why. If the why is good enough, then people will be interested. And so, like my day job, I teach lieutenants about drainage and dirt work. Thrilling stuff. And it's like, why do I need to know this? I'm going to go blow up things and lead soldiers. It's like, well, and then I go and I bring it into real life stuff like outside the Army too. And that skill has transferred to teaching biblical stuff too.
Gotcha. All right.
Sorry, another pitfall. I echo the why. But also helping, so one of the pitfalls for me, because I have a little bit different role in education as far as the kids I work with, would be parents or teachers or even the kids themselves putting a ceiling or cap on what they're actually capable of. And so it's my job to help them always see that they are capable of more, and helping parents and teachers see that they are capable, those kids or whoever is capable of more.
Gotcha.
The instructions Jesus gave us was to go and teach, and you teach what you know. And one of the things that has been a thing that has always been said was, you may be the only sermon that somebody hears. So it doesn't matter. You don't need to go to classes. It's helpful, but you don't need to have a seminary degree or anything. You teach what you know, and Jesus said, go and teach, and that's what we're to do.
Yes. And there are ways to get, holy cow, we have a lot of, okay, these two, then we're moving on. So, definitely not you. Go, yes, go.
All right, yes. Everything you said, yes, because ultimately, what I would want people to know about, if it's a gift that I have, is that I don't commit it solely to the congregation. Even today I was able to give Romans 8:22 to a checkout person at Menards, because last week she'd asked about, said things are just crazy. People are on either side. Now it's one side or the other. And I went ahead and told her about the groanings of the earth, told her to read chapter 1 through 6 of Genesis, because I was expressly telling her about that. That happened outside. And so you can imagine me holding court in Menards. It happens all the time. But my point is this, is that the thing about our gift is that it should be honed here, but it should be shared out there all the time. Yeah. You can drop the Lord into any conversation, especially when people are scared about the future.
Go ahead.
You also may be the only sermon someone sees. And if we aren't living up to what we're saying or what we're teaching verbally, then it doesn't matter.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. If you're going to teach something, you need to be willing to do that as well. So, last question, what is one thing you'd like others to know about your gift? Aaron said, teaching can be learned. Even gifted teachers have to practice. You start by imitating how you've been effectively taught and hone your skills over time. I think that touches on what several people were saying, that you can get better at it, and the more you practice it.
I know you don't want to listen to me, but
But you're going to make me anyway.
nope,
so.
just kidding. One of the things I want to say you and I talked about was, and I'm bringing this not from teaching biblical, but more of managing people, which you're teaching all the time. Sometimes when you go into a situation where you're teaching, you become the one that's learning. So keep that open. You may learn a new perspective from a new person, and it may allow you to look at that a different way, and we touched on that earlier. Second thing is, I don't have the gift of teaching, but what I've learned from whether it's employees or kids, I'm teaching someone at all times, just by my actions, just by what I'm saying, what I'm doing. So whether we're in here, we're out in the world, we're always teaching someone.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agreed with that. Colleen.
Well, Derek kind of said what I was going to say, except I learned more teaching than I did probably listening to a sermon, because I had to delve deep. And as a new Christian, I didn't teach on my own. I learned from a teacher that I was with or whatever. And then when I started teaching, they were in there with me to make sure I was teaching. But you have to really look hard when you are, especially new in the faith, to know that you are teaching correctly and not leading someone astray, because you can lead someone astray with words that you didn't mean to use or shouldn't have used, whatever, but you have to be careful with that. And our life, as we live, is teaching in itself, because not everybody at the hospital where I worked knew they didn't use bad language around me. And they knew if they brought up something religious that I was going to jump in there, and they would come to me sometimes. But your life is sometimes teaching in itself, and we have to be careful of how we act so we do teach correctly.
Here, make sure Ben has the microphone here.
Okay. So everything that has just been said is a lot of pressure on self and teaching. So one thing to keep in mind as a teacher is, yes, obviously you want to seek truth, but don't rely on yourself for that. Make sure you are praying and having God guide you and lead you, because if you're only relying on yourself and your knowledge, then you're going to fail, because you're a human.
Correct.
Also, if you're teaching a sermon that is going to be the only sermon that somebody hears, and that's a lot of pressure. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Focus on what you're teaching and focus on Christ. And again, if you're praying and having the Holy Spirit guide you through your lessons and your sermons, then there's nothing to worry about. So that's just take the pressure off yourself.
Yes, that's a very good point. All right, we have like a minute left. So, Ben, if you could answer this last question. What is one thing you'd like others to know about your gift?
It can be learned. Yeah, I had to practice a lot.
Agreed. Okay, I am cheating, and because I have the microphone, I can. So I have two things that I want others to know about my gift. We talk a lot about extreme detail people versus not detail people, and us getting frustrated with the other. I would say that going into extreme detail is just to make sure I understand what I'm talking about more fully, and to also understand like the ramifications of what that's going to do by going, oh, I've thought through this quite a bit, and so I think this will result in it going this direction, even though you think that's not a big deal. So I think details are important. Shocking. Secondly, if I ask for feedback, I want real, honest feedback in a loving way. So don't say something just to make me feel good. If I say, did this make sense? And you go, sure, yeah, it made sense. Like, that's not what I want. I want you to say, no, I'm still not understanding. Can you explain it a different way? And then I can say, okay, I need to do a better job of that. Or, again, the topic, like, I'm just going to be honest with you, that topic sounds super boring. But if I find other people who think it's interesting, then you might be outvoted. So Real honest feedback. Okay, so we are out of time. There's a lot more to get to, so I need to discuss this with a couple people, and we might do part 3 next week, or we might move on. We'll see. So on that cliffhanger, really solid note, y'all are dismissed. Thank you for your time this morning. Wesley is dismissing us from class today. Hi, buddy. Hi, buddy. Can you teach? Are you going to teach? Yes. Yes? What are you going to say? Oh, put you down? Okay.